Heartbroken Celeste tosses her engagement ring into the sea, only for tech mogul Cassian to find it washed ashore. Two strangers, one lost ring. Fate isn't done with either of them yet. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Raina Alice shifted her 3-year-old son Micah to her other hip as she stood in line at Wilson's Corner grocery. Her arms were getting tired, but the store only had one functioning shopping cart, and an elderly woman had claimed it first. Raina didn't mind. She was used to making do. "Mama, I'm sleepy," Micah whined, burying his face in her neck. "I know, baby. We'll be home soon," she whispered, kissing his forehead. His skin felt warm against her lips. She hoped he wasn't coming down with something. She couldn't afford to miss another day of work. Raina looked down at the items on the conveyor. Belt, a gallon of milk, a box of store-brand oatmeal, a small pack of diapers and a bunch of bananas. Just the essentials. That was all she ever bought these days. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and a name tag that read Doris, began scanning the items. "How's little Micah doing today?" Doris asked. She'd been working at Wilson's for as long as Raina could remember. Back when Aunt May would bring Raina here as a child, Doris had always slipped her a piece of candy. "He's a little cranky. I think he might be getting a cold," Raina replied, gently patting Micah's back. "Poor thing. There's something going around," Doris said as she scanned the last item. "That'll be $27.83. Raina felt her stomach drop. She'd calculated $24 in her head. She must have gotten the price of the diapers wrong. Trying to keep her composure, she opened her wallet and started counting out the bills. $23 and some change was all she had until payday on Friday. "I'm sorry," she said, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I'll have to put the bananas back." Micah, as if sensing her distress, started to fuss. "Want nanas, Mama?" "Not today, sweetie," she whispered, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. The one that appeared whenever she had to deny her son something, even something as simple as fruit. "Don't," the deep voice came from behind her. Raina turned around to see a man she hadn't noticed before. He was tall with broad shoulders, dressed in a dark coat that looked expensive but not flashy. His face was handsome in a serious way, with calm grey eyes that met hers directly. "Excuse me?" Raina asked, automatically holding Micah a little tighter. "Don't put anything back," the man said. His voice was quiet but firm. "Let me take care of this." "That's very kind, but I can't accept." "That," Raina said, lifting her chin slightly. Pride was sometimes all she had. The man didn't argue. He just reached around her and handed Doris a $10 bill. Please add whatever she was going to remove back to her order. Doris looked at Raina, who shook her head. "Really, I can't, please," the man said, and there was something in his voice, not pity but a simple certainty, that made her pause. "It's just a few dollars." Raina felt Micah squirm in her arms. It had been a long day for both of them. She didn't have the energy to argue. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded once, then surprised her by asking, "Would it be out of line if I asked for your number?" Raina stared at him. "My number?" "Yes," he said, a slight smile softening his serious face. "I'm Julian Mercer. I'm in town for a few weeks and I don't know many people here. I thought maybe we could get coffee sometime." Raina almost laughed. Here she was, holding a fussy toddler counting pennies for groceries, and this man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine was asking for her number. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said, gathering her grocery bags. "Why not?" Julian asked, with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "Because men like you don't ask women like me for coffee unless they want something," Raina replied bluntly. "And I don't have anything to give." She saw a flash of surprise in his eyes, followed by something that might have been respect. "Fair enough," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. "But if you change your mind, my number's on here." Before she could refuse, he placed the card on top of her grocery bag and walked out of the store, leaving Raina staring after him. "Well, he seemed nice," Doris said with a knowing smile. "And handsome too." "He's probably just passing through," Raina said, tucking the card into her pocket without looking at it. but she couldn't deny that there had been something compelling about Julian Mercer's calm, grey eyes. The walk back to her apartment was cold. November in Queens had a bite to it, and Rayna's coat had seen better days. Micah had fallen asleep on her shoulder, his warm breath against her neck the only comfort in the chilly evening. Her apartment building was old but well maintained. Her Aunt May had owned one of the units and left it to Rayna when she passed, away 2 years ago. It was the only reason Rayna could afford to live in New York at all. The building also housed May's Little Learners, the daycare her aunt had run for over 20 years, and which Rayna now managed. As she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, she thought about the man from the grocery store. Julian Mercer. There had been something different about him. He hadn't looked at her with pity, the way so many people did when they saw a young, single mother struggling to make ends meet. Once inside, she put Micah to bed in his small room off the main living area, then unpacked the groceries. The bananas went into a bowl on the counter, and seeing them made her feel both grateful and uncomfortable. She didn't like accepting help, especially from strangers. After taking a quick shower, Rayna curled up on her sofa with a cup of tea. Almost without thinking, she took Julian's business card out of her pocket. Julian Mercer, CEO, Mercer Technologies, she read aloud. Below that was a San Francisco address and a phone number. She turned the card over and found a handwritten note. No strings attached, just coffee. Rayna put the card down on her coffee table. A CEO from San Francisco. What was he doing in a small grocery store in Queens? And why would he be interested in someone like her? She had learned the hard way not to trust charming men with their smooth words and empty promises. Micah's father, Derek, had been full of big dreams and bigger lies. He'd disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant, leaving her to face parenthood alone at 23? No, Julian Mercer might seem different, but men like him, successful, powerful, were used to getting what they wanted. And Rayna wasn't going to be anyone's charity case or temporary distraction. She placed the business card in a drawer and tried to forget about it. The next morning was a whirlwind of activity. Micah woke up with a slight fever, which meant Rayna had to call into her evening waitressing job to say she couldn't make it. It was her second absence this month, and she could hear the annoyance in her manager's voice. One more missed shift, and she might not have a job to go back to. Thankfully, she could still work at the daycare during the day, keeping Micah with her where she could monitor his temperature and make sure he rested. By afternoon, his fever had broken, and he was playing quietly with blocks in the corner while the other children napped. Rayna's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hello, Rayna. This is Julian Mercer from the grocery store. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from Doris. I wanted to send you this link to a children's book I thought Micah might enjoy. No strings, I just want to know your story." Attached was a link to an online version of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Rayna felt a mix of emotions. Surprise that he'd gone to the trouble of getting her number, irritation at Doris for giving it out, and a strange flutter of interest that she immediately tried to suppress. She debated ignoring the text, but something made her respond. "Thank you for the book. Micah loves stories about animals. But I'm not sure what story of mine you think would be interesting." His reply came almost immediately. "Everyone has a story worth hearing. Mine is that I'm in New York for the first time in years, staying alone in a hotel that's too quiet, working on a business deal I'm not sure I even want anymore. What's yours?" There was something disarming about his honesty. Before she could overthink it, Rayna found herself typing, "Single mum raising a 3-year-old while running my late aunt's daycare and waitressing at night. It's not exactly fascinating material." "I disagree," Julian responded. "Would you and Micah like to have dinner with me tonight? I promise to have you home by bedtime." Rayna stared at the phone. She should say no. She hardly knew this man. But there was something about his straightforward approach that made her curious. "I can't tonight. Micah has a cold," she wrote back. "Tomorrow then? I know a place that makes great chicken soup. Good for colds." Rayna hesitated, then typed, "I'll think about it." She put her phone away as the children began to wake up from their naps. For the rest of the afternoon, she busied herself with snacks and activities, but her mind kept drifting to Julian Mercer and his unexpected texts. By the time she locked up the daycare and took Micah upstairs for dinner, she had convinced herself to decline Julian's invitation. Men like him didn't just appear in women's lives without a reason, and she had enough complications already. But after Micah was asleep, she found herself looking at Julian's texts again. There was something refreshing about his directness. No games, no pretense. Okay, she texted before she could change her mind. Tomorrow at 6, Julian responded with an address in the neighborhood and a simple, "Looking forward to it." Raina put her phone down and wondered what she was getting herself into. The next day passed in a blur of childcare and nervousness. Raina changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress she hadn't worn in ages. She told herself she was being ridiculous. This wasn't a date, just dinner with a stranger who had been kind to her. At 5:45, she bundled up Micah, who was feeling much better, and headed to the address Julian had sent. It turned out to be a small, cozy restaurant just a few blocks from her apartment. Julian was waiting outside, looking less formal than he had at the grocery store in dark jeans and a grey sweater. When he saw them approaching, a genuine smile spread across his face. "You came," he said, as if he'd half expected her to change her mind. "I did," Raina replied, suddenly feeling shy. Julian knelt down to Micah's level. "Hi there, Micah. My name is Julian. Your mom tells me you like animals, is that right?" Micah, usually shy with strangers, nodded. "I like elephants the best. They have long noses." Julian laughed. "They do indeed. I have a book about elephants in my hotel room. Maybe I can bring it next time we meet." Next time, Raina thought. He was already assuming there would be a next time. The restaurant was warm and inviting, and to Raina's relief, there were several other families with young children. They were seated at a corner table with a booster seat for Micah. "I come here whenever I'm in New York," Julian said as they settled in. "Best chicken soup in the city." "You've been to New York before?" Raina asked, helping Micah with his napkin. "I grew up here, actually," Julian replied. "In Manhattan, but I left for college and never really came back except for business." "What brought you this time?" A shadow crossed Julian's face. "A real estate deal. My company is expanding, and we're looking at properties in the area." "And you're not sure you want the deal anymore?" Raina asked, remembering his text. Julian looked surprised that she'd remembered. "It's complicated," he said after a moment. "Sometimes the smart business move doesn't feel like the right human move." Raina nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. The conversation flowed easily after that. Julian asked about the daycare, and Raina found herself telling him about Aunt May and how she'd built the business from nothing, providing affordable childcare to working families in the neighborhood for decades. "She sounds like an amazing woman," Julian said. "She was," Raina agreed, a lump forming in her throat. "She took me in when my parents died in a car accident. I was only 10. She raised me, supported me through college, and when I got pregnant, and Derek left, she never once made me feel like I'd failed." "You haven't failed," Julian said firmly. "You're raising a great kid and continuing your aunt's legacy. That's success in my book." Micah, who had been quietly eating his soup, suddenly announced, "I'm sleepy, Mama." Raina checked her watch. It was almost 7:30 past his usual bedtime. "We should probably head home," she said apologetically. "Of course," Julian said, signaling. "For the check." When it came, Raina reached for her wallet, but Julian shook his head. "Please let me." "I can pay my share," Raina insisted. Julian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "How about I get dinner, and you can get coffee next time?" There it was again, next time, and the strange thing was, Raina found herself hoping there would be one. Outside the restaurant, the night air was crisp. Micah was half asleep in Raina's arms. "Can I walk you home?" Julian asked. Raina hesitated, then nodded. As they walked the few blocks to her apartment, Julian told her about growing up as the only child of busy, career-focused parents. "They gave me everything except their time," he said without self-pity. "I had the best education, traveled the world, but family dinners like tonight, those were rare." At her building, they stopped. Raina shifted Micah, who was now fully asleep, to a more comfortable position. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "It was nice." Julian smiled. "It was. Can I call you tomorrow?" Raina found herself nodding before she could think of a reason to say no. "Good night, Raina," Julian said softly, and for a moment she thought he might lean in to kiss her cheek. Instead, he gently touched Micah's back. "Good night, little man." As Raina climbed the stairs to her apartment, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a flutter of excitement, of possibility. Julian Mercer was unlike anyone she'd ever met, but she reminded herself to be cautious. Men came and went. She and Micah were the constants in each other's lives, and she couldn't afford to forget that. Still, as she tucked Micah into bed and got ready for sleep herself, she couldn't help but look forward to Julian's call the next day. Maybe, just maybe, he was different. Or maybe he would disappoint her like all the rest. Only time would tell. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian became a regular presence in Raina and Micah's life. True to his word, he called the day after their dinner, and the day after that. Sometimes they would meet for coffee while Micah played with toys Julian had brought him. Other times, they would take walks in the neighborhood park, with Micah running ahead to chase pigeons while they talked. Raina found herself looking forward to seeing him, even as a cautious voice in the back of her mind warned her not to get too attached. Julian would be returning to San Francisco eventually, and then what? She and Micah would go back to their regular lives, perhaps a little sadder for having known him. On a crisp Saturday morning, Julian showed up at their door with 3 paper cups of hot chocolate and a small bag of pastries. "I thought we could have breakfast together before I head to a meeting," he said when she opened the door. Micah, still in his dinosaur pajamas, squealed with delight when he saw Julian. "Did you bring me chocolate milk?" "Even better," Julian said, kneeling down to Micah's level. "Hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows. Can we have a picnic on the floor?" Micah asked, already pulling at Julian's hand. Julian looked at Raina, eyebrows raised in question. She nodded, smiling despite herself. It was hard to maintain her guard when Julian was so natural with Micah, never forcing anything, just meeting him where he was. They spread a blanket on the living room floor and Julian carefully arranged the pastries on a plate. "So what's this meeting about?" Raina asked, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. Julian's smile faded slightly. "Just business. The real estate deal I mentioned." "The one you're not sure about?" He nodded. "It's complicated. My board wants this property. It's in a prime location for our East Coast headquarters. But I'm not sure it's the right move." "Why not?" Raina asked, genuinely curious. Julian rarely talked about his work in detail. Before he could answer, Micah tugged on his sleeve. "Can you read me a story after breakfast?" "Of course, buddy," Julian said, the warmth returning to his face. "Which one do you want to hear?" "The elephant book," Micah exclaimed. Julian had indeed brought the promised book about elephants on their second meeting, and it had quickly become Micah's favorite. "The elephant book it is," Julian agreed, ruffling Micah's hair. Raina watched them together, a familiar ache in her chest. This was what Micah had been missing, a male figure who paid attention to him, who listened to his stories and answered his endless questions with patience. Derek had never once read Micah a story, not even when he was a newborn. After breakfast, Julian kept his promise and read to Micah while Raina cleaned up. She could hear Micah's giggles and Julian's deep voice changing for each character in the story. It was a sound she could get used to, and that realization scared her. When the story was finished, Julian checked his watch and sighed. "I have to go to that meeting now, buddy. But how about we go to the zoo tomorrow? Would you like that?" Micah's eyes widened. "The zoo? With real elephants?" "Real elephants," Julian confirmed. "And lions and monkeys and whatever else you want to see. Can we, Mama?" Micah asked, turning to Raina with pleading eyes. "I don't know, Micah. Mama has to work at the restaurant tomorrow," Raina said reluctantly. Sundays were busy at the diner, and she couldn't afford to miss another shift. "What time do you get off?" Julian asked. 3 o'clock, perfect. We'll go after that. The zoo's open until 6, and it's not far from here." Raina hesitated. "I don't want you to have to wait around." "All day?" "I don't mind," Julian said simply. "I have some work to do anyway, and then we can have an early dinner after the zoo, if that works for you." The hopeful look on Micah's face made it impossible to say no. "Okay," Raina agreed. "That sounds nice." Julian's smile was warm as he stood to leave. At the door, he paused. Raina, I've really enjoyed these past 2 weeks. Me too, she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Good, he said softly. I'll see you tomorrow then. After he left, Raina sat on the couch, lost in thought. She was starting to care for Julian in a way that went beyond friendship, and that terrified her. She'd been down this road before, letting a man into her life only to be left alone when things got tough. She couldn't put Micah through that again, but Julian wasn't Derek. He was kind, reliable, and seemed to genuinely care about both her and Micah. Still, he lived across the country. This, whatever it was between them, had an expiration date. The next day at the diner, Raina found it hard to concentrate. She mixed up orders and spilled coffee, earning a stern look from her manager, Linda. You okay, Raina? Linda asked during a brief lull. You seem distracted today. I'm fine, Raina said, wiping down a counter. Just a lot on my mind. Linda, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had worked at the diner for over 20 years, gave her a knowing look. It wouldn't have anything to do with that handsome man who's been coming in to see you, would it? Raina blushed. Julian had indeed stopped by the diner a few times during her shifts, always sitting at the counter and ordering nothing more than coffee while he worked on his laptop. We're just friends, Raina insisted. Linda hummed, clearly unconvinced. Well, just friend or not, he seems like a good one. It's not like that lowlife who left you high and dry with Micah. Raina sighed. Julian's different, but he lives in San Francisco, Linda. He's just here on business. Long distance can work, Linda said with a shrug. My sister's been married to a pilot for 30 years. They make it work. Before Raina could respond, the bell over the door jingled and a new group of customers walked in. Grateful for the interruption, Raina grabbed her notepad and went to take their order. At exactly 3 o'clock, as Raina was hanging up her apron, Julian walked through the door with Micah in his arms. Her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who watched. Micah, when Raina worked at the diner, followed behind them. Look who I found outside, Julian said with a grin. This little guy was very excited about seeing elephants. Julian came to pick us up in a car, Micah exclaimed. A big black one with a driver. Raina raised her eyebrows at Julian, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I thought it would be easier than taking the subway to the zoo, he explained. Mrs. Rodriguez said it was okay if I picked him up early. Mrs. Rodriguez, a plump woman with kind eyes, patted Raina's arm. This young man was very polite, Carita. He showed me his ID and everything, and Micah was so excited. Thank you for watching him, Mrs. Rodriguez, Raina said, giving the older woman a hug. Any time, you know that. Now go. Have fun at the zoo, Mrs. Rodriguez said, waving them off. Outside, a sleek black car was indeed waiting at the curb. Raina gave Julian a look. A car service? Really? Julian shrugged. It's easier with a child. And it's not a big deal, Raina. I use these all the time. For work. Raina wanted to argue, to remind him that this wasn't how normal people lived. But Micah was practically bouncing with excitement, and she didn't want to ruin his day. The zoo was a hit. Micah ran from exhibit to exhibit, his eyes wide with wonder. Julian, to Raina's surprise, knew a lot about animals and shared interesting facts with Micah at each stop. How do you know so much about animals? Raina asked as they watched Micah press his face against the glass at the penguin exhibit. I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was a kid, Julian admitted. I had all these books about animals. Used to drive my parents crazy with random facts at dinner. What changed? Julian's expression turned wistful. My father had other plans. The family business was technology, not animals. He made it clear that I was expected to follow in his footsteps. And you just went along with it? Raina asked, unable to imagine giving up on a dream so easily. I was 18 and desperate for his approval, Julian said with a shrug. By the time I realized I was chasing the wrong dream, I was already running the company. After my father died, there were hundreds of employees depending on me. I couldn't just walk away. Raina studied his face. There was a sadness there she hadn't noticed before. Do you regret it, not following your own path? Julian thought for a moment. Sometimes. But I've built something important. Mercer Technologies employs over 1,000 people. We're doing good work, it's just... He trailed off, watching Micah, who was now mimicking a penguin's waddle. It's just not what you would have chosen for yourself, Raina finished for him. Julian gave her a surprised look, as if she had seen something in him that most people missed. Exactly. Their eyes met and Raina felt a flutter in her stomach. There was something happening between them, something that went beyond the casual friendship they'd been pretending to have. "Mama! Julian! Look at me!" Micah called, still doing his penguin impression. The moment broke, and they both turned to watch Micah laughing at his antics. After the zoo, they had dinner at a family-friendly restaurant nearby. Micah, tired from all the excitement, fell asleep in the car on the way home. When they reached Raina's apartment building, Julian carried the sleeping boy up the 3 flights of stairs without complaint. Raina unlocked the door and led him to Micah's room, where Julian gently laid him on the bed. "Thank you," Raina whispered, as they tiptoed out of the room. "He had a wonderful day." "So did I," Julian said, his voice equally soft. In the dim light of the living room, with Micah's steady breathing the only sound, the air between them felt charged with possibility. "Would you like some tea?" Raina asked, suddenly nervous. "I'd like that," Julian replied, following her into the small kitchen. As Raina filled the kettle, Julian leaned against the counter, watching her. "Raina, I need to tell you something." The serious tone of his voice made her pause. "What is it?" "I'm not just in New York for any real estate deal," he began, his eyes fixed on hers. "My company is looking to buy a property in Queens for our new headquarters, a residential building with commercial space on the ground floor." Raina nodded, not understanding why he seemed so tense. "Okay, that sounds like a good business opportunity." Julian took a deep breath. "The building is this one, Raina, the one we're standing in right now." Raina froze, the kettle forgotten in her hand. "What? I didn't know it was your building when we first met," Julian said quickly. "I had no idea you lived here or that your aunt's daycare was here. I only found out last week when my team showed me the detailed property reports." Raina set the kettle down with a thud. "So all this time, while you were having breakfast with us and taking Micah to the zoo, you knew you were planning to buy our home?" "It's not like that," Julian protested. "When I realized this was your building, I started looking for alternatives. I've been trying to convince my board that we should consider other properties." "But they want this one," Raina said flatly. It wasn't a question. Julian nodded reluctantly. "It's in the perfect location and the price is right. The current owner is eager to sell." "And what happens to the current tenants? To the daycare that's been here for 20 years? Raina asked, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Julian said. "My board wants to convert the entire building to office space, which would mean evicting everyone," Raina finished, her heart pounding. "Including me and Micah. Including the daycare that serves 20 families in this neighborhood." Julian ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I'm trying to find a compromise, Raina. Maybe we could keep the daycare space, relocate it within the building, or—" "Stop," Raina said, holding up a hand. "Just stop. This isn't about finding a compromise, Julian. This is about people's lives. My life. Micah's life. The lives of all the families who depend on affordable childcare so they can work." "I know," Julian said, his voice strained. "That's why I've been fighting my board on this. That's why I'm not sure I want this deal anymore." Raina laughed bitterly. "And yet you didn't think to mention any of this to me until now. You've been coming into our home, spending time with my son, making us both care about you, all while knowing you might be the one to take our home away." The hurt and betrayal in her voice made Julian flinch. "I was trying to find a solution first. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily." "That wasn't your decision to make," Raina said, anger replacing her initial shock. "You should have told me the moment you realized it was our building." Julian nodded, accepting her anger. "You're right, I should have. I'm sorry." "I think you should go," Raina said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Raina, please," Julian began, but she cut him off. "I need time to think, Julian, and I need to figure out what this means for me and Micah." Julian looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. "I understand, but please know that I'm going to do everything I can to fix this." "Just go," Raina said, turning away so he wouldn't see the tears forming in her eyes. She heard him sigh, Then the sound of his footsteps moving toward the door. There was a pause as if he wanted to say something else, but then the door opened and closed and he was gone. Raina sank onto a kitchen chair, her mind racing. How could she have been so foolish? She'd let her guard down, allowed herself to believe that Julian Mercer might actually care about her and Micah. But in the end, he was just another businessman looking out for his own interests. The worst part was that she had started to fall for him. Despite all her caution, despite all her promises to herself that she wouldn't let another man get close enough to hurt her, she had begun to imagine a future with Julian in it. And now this. Her home, her business, her entire life was at risk. And the man she thought might be different was at the center of it all. The next morning, Raina woke up with a sense of determination. She had spent half the night researching tenant rights and the other half making plans. She might not have Julian's wealth or business connections, but she wasn't going down without a fight. After getting Micah ready for the day, she took him downstairs to the daycare as usual. But instead of starting the morning activities, she called an emergency meeting with her staff and the parents who were dropping off their children. "I've just learned that the building may be sold to a company that plans to convert it to office space," she announced to the shocked group. "Which means the daycare and all of us living here could be evicted." There were gasps and murmurs of concern from the assembled parents, many of whom relied on the affordable daycare to be able to work. "What can we do?" asked Maria Santos, a single mother of twins who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. "We fight," Raina said firmly. "I've been researching our options. If enough of us band together, we might be able to delay or even prevent the sale." "Who's buying the building?" asked Tom Chen, whose daughter had been attending the daycare since she was an infant. Raina hesitated. "Mercer Technologies. It's a tech company from San Francisco." "Wait, isn't that the company run by that guy you've been seeing?" asked Lisa, one of Raina's teaching assistants. "The one who brought those fancy books for the kids last week?" Raina felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned to her. "Yes," she admitted. "Julian Mercer is the CEO, but I didn't know about the building until yesterday." "So he's been dating you while planning to kick us all out?" Maria asked incredulously. "That's cold. He says he's trying to find another solution," Raina said, unsure why she was defending him. "But his board of directors wants this building." "Well, we want it too," Tom said firmly. "My family has lived here for 3 generations. My grandmother opened the first Chinese restaurant in this neighborhood in that storefront across the street. We're not going anywhere without a fight." Raina felt a surge of gratitude for her neighbors and the parents who trusted her with their children. "Then let's get organized. I've prepared a petition, and I've found a tenants' rights attorney who's willing to meet with us this afternoon." The meeting broke up. With parents signing the petition and volunteering for various tasks, Raina felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was about more than just her feelings for Julian. This was about her community, her livelihood, and her son's future. Later that afternoon, as she was preparing for the meeting with the attorney, her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "I need to see you, please. I think I've found a solution." Raina stared at the message, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to continue with her plans to fight the sale, but another part, the part that had begun to care deeply, for Julian wanted to hear what he had to say. After a moment's hesitation, she typed a reply. "I'm meeting with a tenants' rights attorney at 4. If you want to talk, you can meet me at the coffee shop on the corner at 3. Julian's response came, "Immediately. I'll be there." At 3 o'clock sharp, Raina walked into the coffee shop, Micah in tow. She had tried to find someone to watch him, but everyone was busy preparing for the meeting with the attorney. Julian was already there, sitting at a table in the back, his laptop open in front of him. When he saw them, he stood up, his face lighting up briefly before turning serious again. "Thank you for coming," he said as they approached. "Julian," Micah exclaimed, running to him with arms outstretched. Julian knelt to hug the boy, and Raina felt a pang in her chest. In just 2 weeks, Micah had grown so attached to Julian. This would hurt him too when it all fell apart. "Hey, buddy," Julian said, his voice warm. "I brought you something." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small stuffed elephant. "To remember our trip to the zoo." Micah took the toy with delight, immediately making it walk across the table. "You wanted to talk," Raina said, sitting down across from Julian. So talk. Julian nodded, his expression serious. I've been up all night working on this. I think I've found a way to save your building and still satisfy my board. I'm listening, Raina said, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the hope fluttering in her chest. Julian turned his laptop around to show her a presentation. Instead of converting the entire building to office space, we could keep the ground, floor as is for the daycare. We'd renovate the second and third floors for our offices, but we could add a fourth and fifth floor for residential use. Raina frowned. And what about the current residents? Where would they go during construction, and could they afford to come back afterward? That's the part I'm most proud of, Julian said, a hint of excitement in his voice. We would relocate all current residents temporarily at our expense, and when they return, their rent would be guaranteed not to increase for at least 5 years. And the daycare? Raina asked, still skeptical. Would stay exactly where it is, with the same lease. Terms, Julian promised. In fact, we'd be interested in expanding it to serve our employees as well, with Mercer Technologies covering the additional costs. It sounded too good to be true. And your board agreed to all of this? Julian's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Not yet. I'm presenting it to them tomorrow. But I've run the numbers and it makes financial sense. It would cost us more initially, but the goodwill it would generate in the community would be invaluable as we establish our East Coast presence. Raina sat back, her mind racing. If Julian could pull this off, it would solve everything. The daycare would be safe. She and Micah would keep their home, and the other residents wouldn't be displaced, but that was a big if. Why are you doing this, Julian? She asked quietly. Is it just to clear your conscience? Julian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, and because... He hesitated, then continued, his voice low and sincere. Because I've fallen in love with you, Raina, and with Micah. The thought of hurting you, of taking away your home and your livelihood, is unbearable to me. Raina's breath caught in her throat. Love? They'd only known each other for 2 weeks. It was too soon, too fast, and yet... I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything, Julian assured her. I know it's soon, and I know you have every reason to. Be cautious. I just needed you to know why this matters so much to me. Micah, who had been playing quietly with his elephant, looked up at them. Are you and Julian going to get married, Mama? Raina choked on her coffee, and Julian's eyes widened in surprise. No, sweetie, Raina said quickly. Julian and I are just friends. But you like him, Micah said with the simple logic of a child. And he likes you, and he makes you smile. Daddy never made you smile. The innocence and truth of Micah's observation hung in the air between them. It's complicated, buddy, Julian said gently. But I do like your mom very much. And I like you, too. Micah nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to his elephant. Raina looked at her watch. I need to go. The attorney will be waiting. Julian nodded. Of course. But will you let me know what he says? And will you think about my proposal? Which one? Raina asked, a slight smile finally breaking through her reserve. The business one or the personal one? Julian's answering smile was warm. Both, I hope. As Raina gathered her things and took Micah's hand, she found herself at a crossroads. Part of her wanted to believe in Julian, to trust that he could find a solution that would work for everyone. Another part, the part that had been hurt before, warned her to be careful. I'll think about it, she said finally, and I'll let you know what the attorney says. Julian stood as they prepared to leave. That's all I can ask for. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. Raina nodded, then surprised herself by leaning forward and kissing his cheek. Good luck with your board tomorrow. As she and Micah walked out of the coffee shop, Raina felt lighter than she had since learning about the building sale. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve losing everything. And maybe, despite all her fears and doubts, there was a chance for something real with Julian. But first she had a meeting with an attorney. And no matter what happened with Julian's proposal, she needed to be prepared to fight for her home and her business, because some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The Mercer Technologies boardroom was silent as Julian finished. his presentation. 10 pairs of eyes stared at him, expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disapproval. Julian stood his ground, waiting for the inevitable pushback. "Let me get this straight," said Victor Harmon, the company's longest-serving board member and Julian's father's old friend. "You want us to spend an additional $8 million to add 2 floors to a building we haven't even purchased yet, just so some daycare can stay open?" Julian kept his voice calm. "It's not just about the daycare, Victor. It's about being good corporate citizens, about entering a new community with respect, not disruption. Our responsibility is to our shareholders," said Diane Mills, another board member, "not to some neighborhood in Queens. Our shareholders care about more than just quarterly profits," Julian countered. "They care about our reputation, our values, and this plan makes financial sense in the long run. The additional residential units will generate steady income, and having an on-site daycare will be a major recruiting advantage. It's an unnecessary complication," Victor insisted. "The original plan was clean, simple, and cost-effective. Buy the building, convert it to office space, done." Julian clicked to the next slide, which showed renderings of the proposed redesign. "This isn't just about being nice, though that would be reason enough. This is about smart business, by preserving the residential character of the building and keeping the daycare operational. We avoid months of potential legal battles with tenants and negative press. We position ourselves as a company that strengthens communities rather than disrupts them." He could see a few board members nodding thoughtfully, but Victor remained unconvinced, and this sudden concern for the tenants wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that you've been dating one of them, would it? Victor asked, his tone sharp. Julian felt a flash of anger, but kept his expression neutral. "My personal relationships are not relevant to this discussion. The merits of this proposal stand on their own." "I disagree," Victor said. "Your judgment is clearly compromised. You've spent the past month trying to find reasons to alter or cancel this deal, and now we know why." "That's enough, Victor," said Rebecca Chen, one of the younger board members. "Julian's proposal deserves to be evaluated on its business merits, not on speculation about his personal life." "Thank you, Rebecca," Julian said. "The fact is, this building isn't just a property to be acquired. It's home to 20 families and a daycare that serves dozens more. If we displace them, we're causing real harm to real people, people who could be our allies rather than our adversaries." The room fell silent again as the board members considered his words. Julian took a deep breath and played his final card. "I've prepared 2 options for a vote today," he said, distributing folders to each board member. "Option A is my proposal, with the building renovation and preservation of the daycare and residential units. Option B is to walk away from this property entirely and find another location for our East Coast headquarters." There were murmurs of surprise around the table. "Those are our only options?" Victor asked incredulously. "What about the original plan?" Julian's gaze was steady. "I won't be a part of displacing 20 families and shutting down a vital community resource. If the board insists on the original plan, you'll need to find someone else to execute it. I'll resign as CEO." The shocked silence that followed told Julian his message had landed. No one, not even Victor, had expected him to put his position on the line. "You can't be serious," Diane finally said. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," Julian replied. "This is a matter of principle for me. We have the resources and the creativity to find a solution that works for everyone. If we choose not to, that's not a company I want to lead." Rebecca leaned forward. "I, for one, think Julian's proposal has merit. It's innovative, socially responsible, and potentially very good for our image as we establish ourselves on the East Coast. I move that we vote on option A." "I second that motion," said Michael Torres, another of the younger board members. Victor looked around the table, realizing he was losing ground. "This is highly irregular, but fine. Let's vote." Julian held his breath as the votes were cast. 4 for his plan, 4 against, with 2 abstentions. Not enough for approval. "It seems we're at an impasse," Victor said with a hint of satisfaction. "No," Julian said firmly. "The bylaws are clear. In the event of a tie, the CEO casts the deciding vote, and I vote for option A." Victor's face reddened. "This is an abuse of your position, Julian. Your father would never have—" "My father built This company by being bold when others were cautious, Julian interrupted. He taught me to stand by my convictions, and that's exactly what I'm doing. He looked around the table. The vote is final. We'll proceed with option A. I'll have the revised contracts drawn up immediately. As the board members filed out, some offering congratulations, others avoiding his gaze, Julian felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd taken a stand, risked everything, and for the moment at least, it had paid off. He pulled out his phone to text Raina the good news, then hesitated. The board had approved his plan, but Victor and his allies wouldn't give up so easily. Until the contracts were signed, nothing was certain. And even then, there would be countless details to work out, potential roadblocks to overcome. Instead of texting, he decided to call her. He wanted to hear her voice, to share this moment with her directly. But when he dialed her number, it went straight to voicemail. Across town, Raina was in the middle of her own battle. The meeting with the tenants' rights attorney had evolved into a full-blown community organizing session. The daycare was packed with residents from the building, parents of children who attended the daycare, and even some local business owners who feared what a corporate takeover might mean for the neighborhood. The law is on your side, the attorney, a passionate woman named Gloria Martinez, was saying. If the new owners want to convert a residential building to commercial use, they need special permits. We can challenge those permits. And in the meantime, asked Tom Chen, what if they try to evict us anyway? They would have to follow legal procedures, Gloria explained, and those take time. We're talking months, possibly years if we fight, every step of the way. Raina, who had been taking notes, felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She glanced at it and saw Julian's name on the screen. For a moment she was tempted to answer, to step outside and hear what he had to say. But the room was full of people counting on her, looking to her for leadership. She silenced the phone and put it away. What about the daycare? Asked Maria. Santos, my kids have nowhere else to go if it closes. The daycare has a commercial lease, Gloria said. Those are harder to break, especially if the terms are being met. When does your lease expire, Raina? Not for another 3 years, Raina answered. But what happens then? Gloria's expression turned grave. That's harder to predict. A new owner could choose not to renew. The mood in the room darkened. For many families, May's Little Learners was the only affordable childcare option in the E neighborhood. Without it, parents would have to travel farther, pay more, or even give up their jobs to stay home with their children. We need to fight this sale before it happens, Tom declared. Once they own the building, we lose leverage. How do we do that? Someone asked. We make noise, Gloria said firmly. We contact local politicians, we get the media involved, we make this a story about a heartless corporation displacing families and destroying a vital community resource. Raina winced at the words heartless corporation. She couldn't reconcile that image with the Julian she knew, the man who read stories to Micah and listened to her dreams with genuine interest. But she also couldn't ignore the reality of what his company was planning. I have contacts at the Queen's Daily News, offered Lisa, Raina's teaching assistant. My cousin's a reporter there. She'd love this story. Perfect, Gloria said. And we need to start a petition right away. Raina, you mentioned you've already drafted one? Raina nodded and handed out copies of the petition she'd prepared. It was straightforward, outlining the community's opposition to the sale and conversion of the building. We need signatures, Gloria continued, not just from residents and daycare parents, but from everyone in the neighborhood. We need to show that this is a community issue. The meeting continued, with tasks being assigned and strategies developed. Raina found herself at the center of it all, coordinating efforts, answering questions, rallying spirits when they flagged. It was exhausting but also exhilarating to see her community coming together like this. By the time the meeting ended, it was late evening. Micah had fallen asleep on a mat in the corner, surrounded by toys. As the last of the neighbors filed out, promising to return with more signatures tomorrow, Raina finally checked her phone. One missed call from Julian, and a text message. Good news. Board approved my plan. Can we talk? Raina stared at the message, unsure how to feel. If Julian's plan had been approved, did that mean the building was safe? Or was this just a softer version of the same outcome? The building would be sold, just with some concessions to make it more palatable. She was too tired to think clearly. She texted back, "Just finished a meeting, we'll call tomorrow." Julian's response came immediately. "Can I see you instead? There's a lot to explain, and I'd rather do it in person." Raina hesitated, then typed, "Okay, lunch tomorrow, the diner at 1. "I'll be there," Julian replied. "Sleep well, Raina." She tucked her phone away and gathered the sleeping Micah in her arms. As she carried him upstairs to their apartment, she found herself torn between hope and suspicion. Julian had promised to find a solution, and maybe he had. But she'd learned the hard way not to trust promises too easily. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. The petition was gaining signatures rapidly, and Lisa's cousin had agreed to write a story about the threatened daycare for the local paper. Raina was so busy coordinating these efforts that she almost forgot about her lunch with Julian. At 12:45, she handed over the daycare to Lisa and walked the few blocks to the diner. Julian was already there, sitting in a booth by the window, a folder of papers on the table in front of him. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her heart skip a beat despite her reservations. "So you came," he said as she slid into the seat across from him. "I said I would," Raina replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "You said you had good news?" Julian nodded, his expression turning serious. "The board approved my plan, but with conditions. I wanted to explain everything to you directly." Linda appeared with coffee for both of them, giving Julian a curious look before moving on to other customers. "I'm listening," Raina said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Julian opened the folder and pushed a document across the table. "This is the revised proposal. The company will buy the building, but instead of converting it entirely to office space, we'll keep the ground floor for the daycare, use the second and third floors for offices, and add 2 new floors above for residential apartments." Raina scanned the document, which included architectural renderings of the renovated building. "And what happens to the current residents?" "To me and Micah, that's where it gets complicated," Julian admitted. "During construction, which would take about 8 months, all residents would need to relocate temporarily. The company would cover all moving expenses and provide a stipend for the inconvenience. And after construction," Raina pressed, "all current residents would have the right to return, with their rent frozen at current levels for 5 years, Julian said. "After that, any increases would be capped at 3% per year." It sounded reasonable, better than Raina had dared to hope, but there had to be a catch. "And the daycare?" "Would stay exactly where it is with a new 10-year lease at current rates," Julian said. "In fact, Mercer Technologies would be interested in expanding it to serve our employees as well, with the company covering the additional costs," Raina sat back, trying to absorb it all. "This is not what I expected." Julian reached across the table, hesitating briefly before placing his hand over hers. "I told you I was trying to find a solution that worked for everyone. This is it. It's not perfect, I know. The temporary relocation will be disruptive. But in the end, you keep your home, the daycare stays open, and no one gets pushed out." Raina looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was sincerity and something else, a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "Why did you do this, Julian?" she asked quietly. "You could have walked away, found another building without all these complications." Julian's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I told you yesterday, I've fallen in love with you, Raina, and with Micah. I couldn't bear the thought of hurting you." Raina felt a flutter in her chest at his words, but something still bothered her. "So, this is all because of me? What if we hadn't met that day at the grocery store? Would you still be trying to save the building?" Julian's expression turned thoughtful. "I'd like to say yes, that I would have done the right thing anyway, but honestly, I don't know." Meeting. "You changed me, Raina. You reminded me of what really matters." His honesty was disarming. Raina found herself wanting to believe him, to trust that his intentions were genuine. But years of disappointment had taught her caution. "What about your board?" she asked. "You said they approved with conditions." "What conditions?" Julian sighed. "They want guarantees that the expanded daycare will be operational within 3 months of us taking ownership to serve our employees. And they want to start construction as soon as possible, which means we'd have to move out soon," Raina finished for him. "Yes," Julian admitted, "within 60 days of the sale closing." Raina pulled her hand away. 60 days? Julian, that's not enough time to find temporary housing for 20 families, much less arrange for the daycare to continue operating somewhere else during construction. I know it's fast, Julian said, but I'm working on solutions for that too. We could rent a block of apartments nearby for all the residents. And for the daycare, there's a vacant storefront 2 blocks away that could work as a temporary location. Raina shook her head, overwhelmed by the speed at which everything was happening. This is all moving too fast. I need to talk to the other residents, to the parents who use the daycare. I can't make these decisions alone. Of course, Julian said, take whatever time you need. The sale won't close for at least 30 days, so there's time to work out the details. Raina nodded, but her mind was racing. The community had been mobilizing to fight the sale entirely. How would they react to this compromise? Some might see it as a victory, others as a surrender. There's something else you should know, Julian said, his voice dropping lower. I told the board that if they didn't approve this plan, I would resign as CEO. Raina's eyes widened. You did what? I put my job on the line, Julian said simply. That's how strongly I believe this is the right thing to do. Raina was speechless. Julian had risked his career, the company he'd built, for her and the other residents of the building. I don't know what to say, she finally managed. You don't have to say anything, Julian assured her. I didn't do it to impress you, or to make you feel obligated in any way. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Linda appeared with their food, a club sandwich for Julian, a bowl of soup for Raina. Neither of them had ordered, but Linda knew their usuals by now. You two look serious, she commented. Everything okay? We're working on it, Julian said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When Linda moved away, Raina leaned forward. I appreciate everything you're trying to do, Julian, really. But I need to discuss this with the others before I can give you an answer. I understand, Julian said. Just know that I'm on your side, Raina, whatever you decide. They ate in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. When the bill came, Raina reached for it, but Julian gently took it from her. My turn, he said. You got coffee last time, remember? It was such a normal, couple-like exchange that it made Raina's heart ache. In another world, without all these complications, maybe they could have had a chance. As they walked out of the diner, Julian stopped on the sidewalk. Can I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe. Raina hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea, not. Until all this is resolved, it's too complicated. Julian's face fell, but he nodded. I understand, but Raina, please know that my feelings for you are real. They're not tied to this deal or to anything else. I want to believe that, Raina said softly, but right now there's too much at stake. I'll wait, Julian said simply, as long as it takes. Raina felt tears threatening and turned away quickly. I have to get back to the daycare. I'll let you know what we decide. She walked away without looking back, afraid that if she saw the hurt in his eyes, she might change her mind. And right now, she needed to think clearly. The future of her home, her business, and her community depended on it. That evening, Raina called another meeting in the daycare. This time she presented Julian's proposal, explaining all the details as clearly as she could. The reactions were mixed, as she'd expected. So instead of fighting the sale, we just accept it and hope they keep their promises, Tom asked skeptically. These are legally binding commitments, Raina pointed out, and it's a better outcome than most of us could have hoped for. But we'd have to move twice, Maria said, bouncing her youngest on her hip. Once for the construction and then back again. Do you know how hard it is to move with children? Raina nodded sympathetically. I know it's not ideal, but the alternative might be losing our homes entirely or ending up in a long legal battle that we might not win. The discussion continued, with valid points raised on both sides. Some residents were ready to accept the compromise, grateful that they wouldn't be permanently displaced. Others were reluctant to trust any corporation, no matter how good the terms seemed. What about you, Raina? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. What do you think we should do? All eyes turned to her. Raina took a deep breath. I think this might be the best outcome we can realistically hope for. Fighting the sale could drain our resources and energy, with no guarantee of success. This way, we get to keep our homes and the daycare stays open. And it has nothing to do with your relationship with the CEO? Someone called from the back of the room. Raina felt her cheeks flush. My personal feelings aren't relevant to this decision. I'm thinking about what's best for all of us, especially the children who depend on this daycare. There were murmurs around the room, some supportive, others dubious. Finally, Gloria, the tenant's rights attorney who had been listening quietly, spoke up. From a legal perspective, this is an unusually generous offer. Most developers wouldn't make these kinds of concessions. If you're asking for my professional opinion, I would advise you to negotiate for longer notice periods and more relocation assistance, but otherwise this is probably the best outcome you could hope for. Her words seemed to carry weight with the group. The mood shifted, with more people expressing cautious support for accepting the deal, albeit with some additional negotiation on the details. By the end of the meeting, a consensus had emerged. They would present a counter-proposal, asking for 90 days' notice instead of 60, and more specific guarantees about the temporary relocations. But the basic framework, selling the building while preserving the daycare and the right of residents to return, was acceptable. Raina volunteered to communicate this decision to Julian. As people filed out, many stopped to thank her for her leadership through this crisis. Their gratitude meant the world to her, but it also made her feel the weight of responsibility even more keenly. Later that night, after putting Micah to bed, Raina sat down to draft an email to Julian, outlining the community's counter-proposal. But the formal language felt wrong somehow, too cold and impersonal for the man who had risked his career to protect her home. Instead, she picked up her phone and called him. Julian answered on the first ring. Raina, is everything okay? Everything's fine, she assured him. We had a meeting tonight about your proposal. And? Julian asked, his voice carefully neutral. We want to counter with a few adjustments, Raina said. 90 days notice instead of 60. More specific guarantees about the temporary relocations. A few other details. There was a pause. That sounds reasonable. I'm sure we can work something out. Good, Raina said, and then found herself without words. There was so much more she wanted to say, but she didn't know how to begin. Raina, Julian said softly, I miss you. And Micah. These past few days without seeing you have been empty. Raina closed her eyes, feeling the same ache in her own heart. I miss you too, she admitted. But it's still complicated, Julian. Until everything is settled. I know, he said. I understand, but maybe we could just talk sometimes. On the phone like this? Raina smiled despite herself. I think I'd like that. Good, Julian said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Because I've been dying to tell you about this ridiculous meeting I had today with a potential client who brought his pet parrot to the conference room. Raina laughed, surprised by the sudden shift to a lighter topic. You're making that up. I'm not. The bird kept interrupting the presentation with, Show me the money. I think the guy must watch a lot of old movies. As Julian launched into the full story, Raina settled back on her couch, feeling some of the tension of the past few days easing from her shoulders. They were still in the middle of a complicated situation, with much to resolve. But for now, just hearing his voice, sharing a moment of normalcy was enough. When they finally said goodnight nearly an hour later, Raina felt more hopeful than she had in days. Maybe there was a path forward after all, one that didn't require choosing between her community and her heart. But as she drifted off to sleep, a nagging worry remained. Julian's board had agreed to his plan, but reluctantly. What if they changed their minds? What if the deal fell through, or worse, reverted to the original plan of full conversion to office space? Until the contracts were signed, nothing was certain. And even then, there would be months of disruption ahead. Moving, finding temporary housing, relocating the daycare, all while trying to keep Micah's life as stable as possible. It was a daunting prospect. But as Raina had learned when Derek abandoned her during her pregnancy, she was stronger than she knew. She would face whatever challenges came, one day at a time, and maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face them alone. The thought of Julian standing beside her, supporting her, loving her, it was both thrilling and terrifying. Could she really open her heart again, take that risk? Only time would tell. For now, all she could do was hold on to hope and keep moving forward. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and negotiations. Julian spent his days shuttling between his company's lawyers and the building's residents, working out the details of the agreement. The 90-day notice period had been accepted, along with most of the other requests from Raina's community. Raina, meanwhile, was busy finding a temporary location for the daycare during construction. The vacant storefront Julian had mentioned turned out to be perfect, close enough that families wouldn't be inconvenienced, and large enough to accommodate all the children. Mercer Technologies would cover the rent and renovation costs to make the space suitable for childcare. Though their days were consumed with practical matters, Raina and Julian spoke on the phone almost every night after Micah was asleep. Their conversations ranged from serious discussions about the building project to silly stories about their days, gradually rebuilding the connection that had been strained by the revelation about the building sale. One evening, about 3 weeks after their lunch at the diner, Julian called with exciting news. "The contracts are ready," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "All the terms we discussed, everything the residents asked for, it's all in there, legally binding." "That's wonderful," Raina said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "When will the residents be able to review them?" "I'm having copies." "Delivered tomorrow morning," Julian replied. "And I've arranged for Gloria to be there to explain any legal terms people don't understand." Raina smiled at his thoughtfulness. "You've really thought of everything." "I've tried," Julian said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I want this to be as smooth as possible for everyone." There was a pause, and then Julian added, "Raina, I was wondering, now that the business side of things is almost settled, could I see you? And Micah, I've missed you both so much." Raina hesitated. She'd been keeping Julian at arm's length until the building situation was resolved, not wanting to complicate matters further. But now, with the contracts ready and the deal about to be finalized, maybe it was time to explore the personal feelings she'd been trying to ignore. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Micah's been asking about you. He still plays with that elephant." "You gave him?" Julian's voice brightened. "How about dinner tomorrow after the contract meeting? I could cook for you both at my hotel suite. It has a full kitchen." "You cook?" Raina asked, surprised. Julian laughed. "I'm not a chef, but I can make a decent pasta, and there's always takeout if I burn it." The normalcy of the suggestion, a simple dinner, a man cooking for a woman and her child, made Raina's heart swell with unexpected emotion. After weeks of stress and uncertainty, the idea of a quiet evening with Julian was deeply appealing. "Dinner sounds perfect," she said. The next day, the contract meeting went better than anyone expected. Gloria reviewed each document carefully, explaining the terms to the assembled residents. To Raina's relief, there were no hidden surprises, no last-minute changes. Everything was exactly as Julian had promised. "I've been doing this for 20 years, Gloria said as the meeting wrapped up, "and I've never seen a developer make these kinds of concessions. You all should feel good about this outcome." There were smiles and even a few tears of relief around the room. What had started as a potential disaster for the community had turned into something hopeful, a chance for renewal without displacement. After the meeting, Raina hurried home to get ready for dinner with Julian. As she helped Micah change into clean clothes, she found herself more nervous than she expected. "Are we going to see Julian?" Micah asked as she combed his hair. "Yes, sweetie. He's making us dinner at his hotel." Micah's face lit up. "I like Julian. He tells good stories and he doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." Raina smiled, touched by her son's simple but insightful observation. Julian did treat Micah with respect, listening to his opinions and answering his questions honestly. It was one of the many things she'd grown to appreciate about him. Julian's hotel was one of the nicest in Queens, though not ostentatiously luxurious. His suite was spacious but homey, with a small kitchen area where he was already at work when they arrived. "My favorite people," he exclaimed, wiping his hands on a dish towel before kneeling to greet Micah with a high five. When he stood, his eyes met Raina's and the warmth in his gaze made her cheeks flush. "Something smells good," she said, deliberately lightening the moment. "Spaghetti and meatballs," Julian replied with a grin. "I figured it was a safe bet with the little guy." "My favorite," Micah declared, Though Raina knew he said that about most foods these days, the evening was relaxed and comfortable, with none of the tension Raina had feared. They ate at the small dining table, Micah chattering about his friends at daycare, and the new toys Julian had sent for all the children, a gesture that had earned him considerable goodwill among the parents. After dinner, Julian produced a deck of cards and taught Micah how to play a simple matching game. Raina watched them, something warm and hopeful blooming in her chest. This felt right, the three of them together. It felt like family. When Micah began to yawn, Julian suggested they watch a movie. Within 20 minutes, Micah was fast asleep, his head on Julian's lap, his small body stretched across the couch between them. "He's had a big day," Raina whispered, gently stroking Micah's hair. Julian nodded, looking down at the sleeping child, with undisguised affection. "He's an amazing kid, Raina. You've done an incredible job with him." "Thank you," she said, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "It hasn't always been easy, but he's worth every struggle." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the movie playing softly in the background. Then Julian spoke, his voice low and serious. "Raina, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart skipped a beat at his tone. "What is it?" Julian took a deep breath. "The board is still not happy about the compromise. Victor, especially, has been making things difficult. He's trying to convince other members to back out." Raina felt a chill run through her. "Can they do that, even with the contracts ready?" "Not legally, no, but they can make the process painful. Delay funding for the renovations, nitpick every detail, that sort of thing." Julian sighed. "Victor sees this whole thing as a sign of weakness on my part. He's challenging my leadership." "What are you going to do?" Raina asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. Julian looked at her, his expression resolute. "I'm going to fight for what's right. For the building, for the daycare, and for us." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "Us?" Raina repeated softly. "If you want there to be an us," Julian said, reaching across Micah to take her hand. "I meant what I said before, Raina. I've fallen in love. With you. And with this little guy. These past few weeks, even just talking on the phone every night, they've been the happiest of my life." Raina felt tears welling in her eyes. "Julian, you don't have to say anything now," he interrupted, gently. "I know there's still a lot to resolve with the building, and I know you need time to trust me, to believe that I'm not going to disappear like Micah's father did. It's not just that," Raina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You live in San Francisco, Julian. Your life is there. Your company. Your home. What happens when this project is finished and you have to go back?" It was the question that had been haunting her, the practical concern behind her emotional hesitation. Julian squeezed her hand. "That's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. I've been thinking a lot about my life in San Francisco, about Mercer Technologies, and what I want for the future." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The truth is, I've been unhappy for a long time. Running the company was what my father wanted for me, not what I wanted for myself. I've been going through the motions, building something I didn't really believe in. And now," Raina asked, "now I'm considering a change, a big one." Julian's eyes were steady on hers. "I'm thinking about stepping down as CEO." Raina gasped. "Julian, no, you can't give up your company. Not because of me." "Not because of you," Julian corrected, "because of me. Because I want a life that means something, that brings me joy. And I've found that here with you and Micah, with this community we're trying to preserve." He shifted slightly, careful not to wake Micah. "I've been talking to Rebecca, one of the board members who supported my plan. She'd make an excellent CEO, more forward-thinking than I've been in many ways, and I could stay on as a consultant, help with the transition." "But what would you do?" Raina asked, struggling to imagine Julian without the company he'd built. Smiles spread across his face. "Remember I told you I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was a kid? Well, it's probably too late for medical school, but I've been looking into programs for wildlife conservation. There's a foundation here in New York that works to protect endangered species. They need someone to run their operations. Someone With business experience, the excitement in his voice was contagious. "You'd be perfect for that," Raina said, finding herself caught up in his vision. "I think I might be," Julian agreed. "And I could be based here in New York, near you and Micah." The implication was clear, and it made Raina's heart race. Julian was considering rearranging his entire life to be with them. It was overwhelming, flattering, and a little frightening. "That's a lot to process," she said honestly. "I know," Julian acknowledged, "and I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight. I just wanted you to know what I'm thinking, where my head is at. Whatever happens with us, I'm making these changes for me. Because meeting you and Micah showed me what's been missing in my life." Between them, Micah stirred slightly in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible before settling again. Julian looked down at him with such tenderness that Raina felt her reservations melting away. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted quietly. "And it terrifies me." Julian's smile was gentle. The best things usually do. The moment was interrupted by Julian's phone buzzing on the coffee table. He glanced at it and frowned. "It's Victor. I should probably take this." Raina nodded, and Julian carefully shifted Micah onto the couch before stepping into the kitchen to take the call. She couldn't hear his words, but his tone grew increasingly tense. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was grim. "What's wrong?" Raina asked, immediately concerned. "Victor's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to try to overturn the agreement, push for the original. Plan again." Raina felt her stomach drop. "Can he do that?" "He can try," Julian said, his jaw set. "But I won't let him succeed. I'm going to fight this, Raina. All the way." The determination in his voice was reassuring, but Raina couldn't help. Worrying. Everything had seemed so close to resolution, and now this new threat. "What can I do?" she asked. Julian thought for a moment. "Actually, there might be something. How would you feel about coming to the board meeting tomorrow? You and representatives from the building and daycare. Put faces to the names, show them who they're really affecting with these decisions." "You want us to confront your board?" Raina asked, surprised. "Not confront exactly. Just be present. Tell your stories. Let them see the human impact of their decisions." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "It's unorthodox, but it might be effective. Victor and his allies see this as just a business transaction. They need to understand it's much more than that." Raina considered the idea. It was intimidating, the thought of speaking to a room full of corporate executives. But if it could help secure the future of the building and the daycare, it was worth trying. "I'll do it," she said decisively. "And I'm sure Tom and Maria and others would come too. We've been preparing to fight for our homes anyway." Julian smiled, relief evident in his face. "Thank you. I'll have my assistant contact everyone first thing in the morning with the details." They spent the next hour planning their strategy for the meeting, until Micah began to stir again. Raina checked her watch and was shocked to see how late it had gotten. "We should go," she said, gathering her things. "Micah needs to be in his own bed, and we both have a big day tomorrow." Julian nodded, though he looked reluctant to see them leave. "I'll send a car for you in the morning," he said as he walked them to the door. At the threshold, he hesitated, then leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her lips. It was brief, but full of promise. "For luck," he said softly. Raina smiled up at him, her heart full. "We'll make our own luck tomorrow." The next morning, Raina arrived at the Mercer Technologies temporary offices in Manhattan with Tom Chen, Maria Santos, and Mrs. Rodriguez. They were all dressed in their best clothes, nervous but determined. Julian met them in the lobby, looking every inch the CEO in a perfectly tailored suit. But his smile when he saw Raina was warm and personal. "Thank you all for coming," he said, addressing the group. "The meeting starts in 15 minutes. I'll go in first to set things up, then have my assistant bring you in." "What exactly do you want us to say?" Tom asked, adjusting his tie nervously. "Just speak from the heart," Julian advised. "Tell them what the building and the daycare mean to you, how displacement would affect your lives, that's all." With a reassuring nod to Raina, Julian headed for the elevator. Once he was gone, Maria turned to Raina with raised eyebrows. "So, you and the CEO, huh?" she said with a knowing smile. "No wonder he's fighting so hard for our building." Raina felt her cheeks flush. It's complicated, she said, which only made the others exchange amused glances. Love is always complicated, querida, Mrs. Rodriguez said wisely. But when it's real, it's worth fighting for, just like our homes. Before Raina could respond, Julian's assistant appeared to escort them to the boardroom. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Raina felt her nervousness growing. What if their presence only angered the board further? What if they made things worse instead of better? The boardroom was intimidating, all gleaming wood and glass, with a spectacular view of the Manhattan skyline. Around a large table sat 10 people in expensive suits, all looking up with varying degrees of surprise as Raina and the others entered. Julian stood at the head of the table, his posture confident. Board members, I've invited some guests to join us today. These are residents of the Queens building we've been discussing, including Raina Ellis, who runs the daycare that serves dozens of families in the neighborhood. Victor Harmon, a stern-looking man with silver hair, frowned deeply. This is highly irregular, Julian. Board meetings are confidential. These people have a direct stake in our decision, Julian replied firmly. I think it's only fair they have a chance to speak. Before Victor could object further, Rebecca Chen, one of the younger board members, nodded her agreement. I think it's a good idea. We're making decisions that affect their lives. We should hear what they have to say. With a majority of the board nodding in agreement, Victor was forced to concede. Very well, but let's be brief. We have a lot to discuss today. Julian gestured for Raina to begin. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. My name is Raina Ellis, she began, her voice steadier than she expected. I run May's Little Learners, the daycare on the ground floor of the building you're planning to buy. The daycare was started by my aunt over 20 years ago to provide affordable childcare to working families in the neighborhood, she went on, to explain how many families depended on the daycare, how it had been a cornerstone of the community for decades. As she spoke, she saw some of the board members' expressions softening. Tom went next, describing how his family had lived in the building for 3 generations, how his grandmother had been one of the first Chinese business owners in the neighborhood. Maria followed, explaining how the affordable rent and on-site daycare made it possible for her to work as a nurse while raising her children as a single mother. By the time Mrs. Rodriguez finished her story about how the building's residents had become like family, supporting each other through good times and bad, several board members were visibly moved. Victor, however, remained unmoved. These are touching stories, he said dismissively, but business decisions can't be based on sentiment. The fact remains that the original plan, converting the entire building to office space, would be more profitable for our shareholders. By how much? Rebecca asked, turning to Julian. Julian clicked to a slide showing financial projections. The difference is approximately 7% over 5 years. After that, the income from the residential units actually makes the revised plan more profitable in the long term. 7% is significant, Victor insisted. Is it worth the human cost? Julian challenged, gesturing to Raina and the others. Is it worth destroying a community resource that served families for decades? Is it worth forcing 20 families to find new homes in a city with an affordable housing crisis? The room fell silent as the board members considered his words. Finally, Rebecca spoke up. I think Julian's right, she said firmly. Our company has always prided itself on ethical business practices. This is a chance to demonstrate that those aren't just empty words. I agree, said Michael Torres, another board member. The revised plan is still profitable, and it creates goodwill in a community where we're establishing a major presence. That's valuable too, even if it doesn't show up on a balance sheet. One by one, other board members voiced their support for Julian's plan. Victor's face grew increasingly red as he realized he was losing the argument. This is ridiculous, he finally exploded. You're all being swayed by a few sob stories and Julian's personal interests. He gave Raina a pointed look that made her bristle. Julian stepped forward, his expression calm but determined. My personal feelings are irrelevant to the merits of this plan, Victor. But since you've brought it up, yes, I care about these people. I care about doing the right thing. And if that's a problem for you, perhaps it's time to reconsider your position on this board. Victor stood abruptly. Are you threatening me, Julian? Not at all, Julian replied evenly. I'm simply suggesting that our company values might no longer align with yours. The tension in the room was palpable as the two men stared at each other. Finally, Victor broke the gaze, gathering his papers. This discussion isn't over, he warned before striding out of the room. After his dramatic exit, the atmosphere lightened considerably. The remaining board members quickly voted to proceed with Julian's revised plan, with the contracts to be signed the following week. As the meeting adjourned, board members came up to shake hands with Rainer and the others, expressing their support for the daycare and the community. Rebecca Chen lingered to speak with Julian, and Rainer noticed them having an intense conversation in the corner of the room. When everyone else had left, Julian approached Rainer with a broad smile. "We did it," he said, taking her hands in his. "The plan is approved officially this time. Victor can't stop it now." Rainer felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly brought her to tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Julian shook his head. "Thank you. Your words today, all of you, that's what made the difference." "What happens now?" Rainer asked, suddenly aware that with the building issue resolved, there was nothing standing between them anymore. "Now," Julian said, his eyes twinkling, "I take you to lunch to celebrate. And then we figure out the rest as we go." Lunch was at a small Italian restaurant near Central Park. As they sat across from each other, Rainer felt a new lightness, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I spoke with Rebecca after the meeting," Julian said as they waited for their food, "about my plans to step down as CEO." Rainer's heart skipped a beat. "And?" "She's interested. We're going to work out a transition plan over the next few months." Julian reached across the table to take her hand. "Which means I'll be spending a lot more time in New York, if that's okay with you." Rainer smiled, squeezing his hand. "I think Micah and I could get used to having you around." "Just get used to?" Julian teased. "Not be deliriously happy about?" Rainer laughed, feeling a joy she hadn't experienced in years. "That too. Definitely that too." As they ate, they talked about the future, the building renovations, the temporary relocation of the daycare, Julian's potential new role with the Wildlife Conservation Foundation. It all felt surprisingly natural, as if they had been planning a life together for years instead of weeks. "There's one more thing I wanted to ask you," Julian said as they finished their meal. "It's about the daycare." "What about it?" Rainer asked, curious. "I was thinking about your aunt, about the legacy she created. May's Little Learners has been such an important part of the community for so long." Julian paused, seeming almost nervous. "What would you think about expanding it? Not just to serve our employees, but to create a model that could be replicated in other neighborhoods?" Rainer stared at him, surprised. "Expand? How?" "With funding from the Mercer Foundation, the charitable arm of the company. We could create a network of affordable daycares across the city, all based on your aunt's model, and you would be in charge of it all if you wanted to be." The idea was breathtaking in its scope. Rainer had never imagined taking her aunt's small daycare and turning it into something larger, something that could help even more families. "That's an amazing idea," she said slowly, "but it would be a huge undertaking." "You wouldn't be doing it alone," Julian assured her. "And we'd start small, maybe 1 or 2 new locations in the first year. But I've seen how you run the daycare. Rainer, you have a gift for it, and this could be a way to honor your aunt's memory while creating something even more impactful." Tears welled in Rainer's eyes at the mention of Aunt May. "She always wanted to help more families," she said softly. "She used to talk about opening a second location, but she never had the funding. Now you could make that dream come true," Julian said gently. "Think about it. No pressure, just a possibility." Rainer nodded, overwhelmed by the potential of it all. "I will. Thank you for believing in me." Julian's smile was tender. "That's the easiest thing in the world to do." After lunch, they walked through Central Park, talking and laughing, making plans both tentative and definite. As the afternoon light began to fade, Julian checked his watch reluctantly. "I should get you home. Micah will be wondering where you are." Rainer nodded, though she was reluctant for the day to end. Will you come up, have dinner with us tonight? I'd love to, Julian said, his face brightening. They took a taxi back to Queens, stopping at Wilson's Corner Grocery on the way. As they walked the aisles, picking up ingredients for dinner, Raina was struck by the memory of their first meeting in this very store, when she couldn't afford a bunch of bananas, and Julian had stepped in to help. What are you smiling about? Julian asked, noticing her expression. Just thinking about how we met, Raina replied. Right here, over a $5 bunch of bananas. Julian laughed. Best $5 I ever spent. At the checkout, they found Doris still working behind the counter. She beamed when she saw them together. Well, she said with a knowing smile. It looks like things worked out after all. They did, Julian agreed, taking Raina's hand, thanks to a certain matchmaking cashier who gave out a customer's phone number. Doris winked. I know a good match when I see one. Been married 47 years myself. As they walked the last few blocks to Raina's apartment, the evening air was crisp with the promise of winter. Julian carried the grocery bags in one hand, his other arm wrapped around Raina's shoulders. You know, he said thoughtfully, in all the chaos of the past few weeks, we never actually went on a real date, just the two of us. Raina laughed. You're right. We went from grocery store meeting to family dinners with Micah to real estate. Negotiations. We skipped a few steps. We should fix that, Julian said. Maybe this weekend? Dinner somewhere nice, just adults. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned she'd be happy to watch Micah any time. She did she? Raina asked, amused at the apparent conspiracy. I'd like that, a real date. At her building, they climbed the stairs to find Mrs. Rodriguez waiting outside Raina's door with Micah, who had just returned from an after-school playdate. Julian, Micah exclaimed, running to him with open arms. Julian handed the grocery bags to Raina so he could scoop Micah up. Hey, buddy, how was school today? As Micah launched into a detailed account of his day, Mrs. Rodriguez gave Raina a knowing smile. You look happy, querida, she said quietly. I am, Raina admitted. Really happy. Inside the apartment, they fell into an easy routine, as if they'd been doing this for years. Julian helped Micah with a simple art project, while Raina prepared dinner. They ate at the small kitchen table, Micah chattering about his friends and his toys, Julian listening with genuine interest, Raina watching them both with a full heart. Dinner, when Micah was bathed and in his pajamas, Julian read him a bedtime story. 2, actually, because Micah insisted. When the boy finally fell asleep, Julian carefully tucked the covers around him and placed his stuffed elephant next to his pillow. In the living room, Raina poured 2 glasses of wine, and they settled on the couch together. You're good with him, she said softly. Natural, Julian smiled. He makes it easy. He's such an amazing kid. He likes you a lot, Raina said. He's never taken to anyone so quickly. The feeling is mutual, Julian assured her. I never thought much about having children before. My own childhood wasn't exactly a blueprint for good parenting. But Micah, he makes me want to be better, to create the kind of family I never had. The implication of his words hung in the air between them, a future together, the 3 of them as a family. It was both thrilling and terrifying. We're taking this fast, aren't we? Raina said, voicing her thoughts. We've only known each other for a few weeks, Julian nodded. By most standards, yes, but I feel like I've known you much longer. Like you and Micah were what I was looking for without even knowing it. Raina understood the feeling. Despite all her caution, all her walls, Julian had somehow slipped past her defenses and into her heart with remarkable ease. I'm still scared, she admitted, of getting hurt, of Micah getting hurt, of believing in something that might not last. Julian took her hand, his expression serious. I can't promise we won't face challenges, Raina, but I can promise you this, I'm not going anywhere, not unless you ask me to. Whatever happens with my job, with the building, with anything else, my feelings for you and Micah won't change. Raina studied his face, seeing only sincerity in his eyes. I believe you, she said softly, and realized she truly did. Julian's smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her, a kiss that held both passion and promise. When they finally broke apart, Raina rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. So what happens now, she asked. Julian's arm tightened around her. Now we take it one day at a time. We sign the contracts for the building next week. We start planning the temporary relocation. I work on the transition at Mercer Technologies, and somewhere in there, we go on that date. Raina smiled. Sounds like a plan. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. Outside, the lights of the city twinkled against the night sky. Inside, the small apartment felt like the center of the universe. "Thank you," Julian said suddenly. "For what?" Raina asked, looking up at him. "For letting me help that day at the grocery store. For giving me a chance despite all your doubts. For showing me what really matters." Julian's voice was thick with emotion. "You and Micah have changed my life, Raina. In all the best ways." Raina reached up to touch his face. "You've changed ours too. I was so focused on just getting by, on keeping Micah safe and provided for, that I forgot there could be more. You reminded me." Julian kissed her again, softly this time. "To second chances," he murmured against her lips. "And to $5. Well spent," Raina replied with a smile. 6 months later, the renovations on the building were nearly complete. The temporary daycare location had worked out so well that Raina decided to keep it as the first expansion of what was now called May's Little Learners Network, with funding from the Mercer Foundation. Julian had officially stepped down as CEO of Mercer Technologies, with Rebecca Chen taking over. He now divided his time between consulting for the company and his new role as operations director for the Wildlife Conservation Alliance, a position that suited his business skills and passion for animals perfectly. He had also moved to New York permanently, renting an apartment just a few blocks from Raina and Micah. Though he spent most nights with them, he and Raina had agreed to take the bigger steps in their relationship slowly, for Micah's sake. On a warm spring evening, exactly 6 months after their first meeting at the grocery store, Julian took Raina to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking Central Park. Micah was having a sleepover with Mrs. Rodriguez's grandchildren, giving them a rare night alone together. "I have something for you," Julian said as they finished their dessert. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Raina's heart skipped a beat. "Julian, it's not what you think," he said quickly, opening the box to reveal not a ring, but a key. "At least not yet. That's coming when you're ready. This is something else." Raina took the key, confused. "What is this for?" Julian smiled mysteriously. "I want to show you something. Can we take a walk after dinner?" Intrigued, Raina agreed. After paying the bill, Julian led her through the park to a waiting car. They drove to a quiet residential street in Brooklyn, stopping in front of a charming brownstone with a small front garden. "What are we doing here?" Raina asked as Julian helped her out of the car. "Remember how you said Micah needs a backyard, a place to play outside?" Julian took her hand and led her up the steps. "I thought this might work." Raina's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Julian, is this—" "Try the key," he urged gently. With trembling hands, Raina inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door swung open. Inside, the house was beautiful, spacious but cozy, with hardwood floors and large windows that let in the evening light. "It has 3 bedrooms upstairs," Julian said as he guided her through the rooms, "a big kitchen for family dinners, and the best part—" He opened a back door to reveal a small but perfect garden, complete with a swing set and a sandbox. "Room for Micah to play." Raina turned to him, overwhelmed. "Julian, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not a gift," he explained quickly. "It's an opportunity. The owner is willing to rent it to us, to you, at a reasonable rate, with an option to buy in the future, if you want to." "Us?" Raina repeated, her heart racing. Julian took both her hands in his. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, and I respect that, but these past 6 months have only made me more certain. I love you, Raina. I love Micah. I want to build a life with you both." Tears filled Raina's eyes. "I love you too, and so does Micah, but a house is a big step." "It is," Julian agreed. "But it doesn't have to happen all at once. You and Micah could move in first. I'll keep my apartment. We'll continue as we have been, just with more space for all of us. And then, when the time is right—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Raina knew what he meant. When the time was right, they would take the next step. Marriage, a legal joining of their lives to match the emotional one that had already occurred. "Can we bring Micah to see it tomorrow?" she asked, making her decision. It should be his choice. "Too." Julian's face lit up with joy. "Of course, I already spoke to the owner. We can come back any time." Raina looked around the house again, trying to imagine their life here. Micah playing in the garden, Julian cooking in the kitchen, family dinners around a big table, holidays, birthdays, ordinary days made special by being together. It wasn't hard to picture at all. "I think he's going to love it," she said softly, "almost as much as I do." Julian pulled her close, his arms strong and secure around her. "You know, when I came to New York 6 months ago, I was just going through the motions, doing what was expected of me, not what I wanted. I never imagined a random stop at a grocery store would change everything." Raina smiled against his chest. "Funny how life works, isn't it? One small moment, $5 for a bunch of bananas, and suddenly everything is different." "Not just different," Julian said, tilting her face up to his. "Better. So much better." As he kissed her in what would soon be their family home, Raina knew he was right. From an embarrassing moment at a checkout counter had grown something beautiful and unexpected. A second chance at love, at family, at the life she had always hoped for, but never thought she'd find. Sometimes, she reflected, as Julian held her close, the most precious things begin with the smallest gestures. A helping hand, a kind word, $5 and a second chance. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to take that chance, it leads to everything you ever wanted.